In this show, you will get to hear firsthand the comments, the issues that affect Pakistanis, Americans, and the global community. With insights from politicians, Washington's most valuable and powerful players, in one-on-one, candid conversations. We begin this series with my interview of Congressman Chris Van Hollen. Congressman Van Hollen is currently serving as the most senior Democratic member on the Budget Committee in the U.S. Congress. Above all, and most important to me, he was born in Karachi, Pakistan. Congressman, thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
Well, Faiz, it's great to be with you again.
Thank you, sir. Can we technically call you a Pakistani-American congressman since you were born in Pakistan?
Well, I'm certainly an honorary member of the Pakistani-American caucus, and pleased to be part of that. But you're right, I was born in Karachi, and I visited Pakistan on several occasions as a member of Congress, and I'm very committed to trying to make sure we have strong ties between the people of the United States and the people of Pakistan. And of course, the Pakistani-American community here has been a great contributor to American entrepreneurialism, American culture, as well as many other areas in politics.
Any fond memories of Pakistan? You know, I know you were you were there for a very short period of time, but anything that you would like to share with us?
Well, I was very young at the time, so I actually remember it more through stories that were told to me and photographs that I've seen. Now, my father and mother moved to Murray at the time that the new capital was being built in Islamabad, because the capital, of course, had been in Karachi.
Right.
And so we were up very high in Murray, and I've seen photographs of myself on this swing set where the snow came up to the top of the swing set. So I have some very, very early memories, probably more memories that I think I have from viewing the photographs, because I was very young at the time.
Okay, so those are very monumental and challenging times for Pakistan. You know, your dad was there as a diplomat, and your mother was also, I think, at the same time working with the embassy.
Well, at that time, my mother was there with my father as a spouse, a diplomat spouse, but she was very involved also in South Asia. And when my father retired from the Foreign Service, she went to work at the State Department, where she was overseeing a lot of the analysis with respect to what was happening in Pakistan, Afghanistan, India, and South Asia.
Before we continue further, let's watch a report on a subject that's not new to Pakistan, something that the congressman has been working very closely on: the American debt crisis.
It's not some architectural feature unique to Washington. The debt ceiling is a borrowing limit passed by Congress in 1917 to fund the war effort. Back then, the ceiling was just over $11 billion. Economist Richard Braun says the idea was to enforce discipline on government spending.
It's really redundant when you have a budget. But ironically, it has turned out to be somewhat useful because it forces a debate occasionally about how much we're spending and how we're spending.
Until recently, Congress routinely approved higher limits. But that changed in 2011 when a Republican-led Congress stalled on extending the ceiling, resulting in the first ratings downgrade of U.S. debt. Today, the ceiling is $16.4 trillion, a limit the U.S. is likely to exceed by February.
I think it's beyond the human mind to be able to grasp numbers that big.
Just how big is the U.S. debt? It's easier to visualize if we start with $100. 100 of these makes 10,000. If we multiply that 10,000 by 100, now you have $1 million, enough to fit in a shopping bag. 100 million looks more impressive, shown here on top of a shipping pallet. Make that 10 pallets and you have $1 billion. But now it gets interesting. Multiply these 10 pallets 1,000 times and you have $1 trillion, 1 followed by 12 zeros. That's enough money to cover an entire soccer field 2 pallets high. So to imagine the size of the U.S. debt, simply multiply that double-stacked football field 16 times.
We owe money to everybody. Of course, foreigners have about 40% of our federal debt. non-Americans. The biggest single holder is the Chinese.
Japan also owns a sizable amount, as does Europe, along with private investors around the world. Many conservative politicians want to cut the debt sharply, and some say the debt limit should not be raised without more spending cuts. The Congressional Budget Office says the so-called fiscal cliff, automatic tax increases on January 1st, along with spending cuts mandated by Congress to force negotiations on the debt ceiling, would cut next year's deficit in half. But doing so all at once poses serious risks, says fiscal responsibility advocate Robert Bixby.
They've been pretty clear, the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office, that if we go over the fiscal cliff, their projection is that it would cause a recession. And I've seen private sector forecasts that are even more adamant.
Some in Congress would like to see a higher debt ceiling as part of negotiations. For now, many economists say avoiding the shock that would come from higher taxes and government cutbacks is far more critical to the world's largest economy. Experts say any missteps could have big ramifications domestically and abroad just when the global recovery appears to be losing momentum. Millar Sega, VOA News, Washington.
Congressman, you've been here in Congress for almost 10 years.
That's right, since 2002 election. Yeah.
And your rise has been meteoric, to say the least. Now you're one of the highest ranking Democratic member of Congress.
Well, I've had the benefit of having lots of opportunities here. I served in a political capacity in charge of what we call the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, and I was very honored that my colleagues elected me to be the ranking member, the senior member of the Democrat on the Budget Committee, which has been at the center of a lot of the major debates we've had here in the United States.
And actually a new post was created for you, especially for you by Speaker Nancy Pelosi, assistant to the Speaker.
Yes.
That made you attend all the important meetings, and that's how you became part of this super committee. Am I right?
Well, we're mixing up a little bit two different periods.
Okay.
So when the Democrats were in the majority and Nancy Pelosi was the Speaker of the House, I became assistant to the Speaker.
And that gave rise to your, your participation in the, that set the ground for...
That, as a result of that, I became part of what's known as the Democratic leadership, a group of leaders, Democratic leaders in the Congress. Unfortunately, from my perspective and the perspective of Democrats, we lost the majority in the House of Representatives in the 2010 midterm elections. We hope to gain it back. We need to win 25 seats. But when we lost the majority is when I ran for the senior Democratic position on the Budget Committee. And in that capacity, as the senior Democrat on the Budget Committee and a member of the Democratic leadership, I've had the chance to participate in what first were called the Biden talks, led by Vice President Biden, and later on had the opportunity to participate in the so-called super committee, which unfortunately did not succeed at accomplishing our goal of achieving additional deficit reduction, but that's a whole involved story.
But you were one Democratic member of the committee who was praised by the Republicans very generously, I guess. I mean, they praised your participation and also your genuine efforts to make a difference in the committee.
I worked closely with both my Democratic colleagues and my Republican colleagues to try and achieve some compromise that would allow us to meet our goal, our objective.
Too bad it didn't work out, though.
Unfortunately, it did not, but it wasn't for lack of trying by many of us on that committee. And I did have the opportunity to exchange views and ideas with our Republican colleagues. And I think some of the work that we did on that committee may lay the foundation for a future path forward. We'll see. I hope that some good will come out of it in the long run.
You declined a Senate seat in Maryland. I mean, you had a chance. I mean, the state had an open seat, and you went for a leadership position in the House. Any regrets? Looking back, do you think, did you make the right decision?
I don't have any regrets. I had a chance to run for the United States Senate back in 2004. It was very shortly after I'd been elected to the House of Representatives, and I had what I thought was a lot of work to do in the House. And I have no regrets because I've had really great opportunities in the House to participate in the national debates on the key issues. As you indicated, I had the privilege of participating in the House Democratic leadership when we were in the majority, where we passed some very important pieces of legislation, the Affordable Care Act, the Health Care Reform Act, the Wall Street Reform Act, the Recovery Act, which is now, I think, demonstrating, we're demonstrating that the economy is improving, in part due to the actions that we took. So I had the opportunity when the Democrats were in the majority to be in the middle of the decision-making process, and since we've been in the minority party, again, have a chance to participate as a member of the Democratic leadership and as the senior Democrat on the Budget Committee, and that's where we have some of these really key debates as to how we should best move our country forward, move the United States forward in terms of our economy and addressing the key issue of jobs.
Since we were talking about the Super Committee on Budget, you know, looking around the world, there are so many challenges, and you are a global citizen in the sense that you grew up around the world. You've been to so many countries, to their schools. So do you think there should be a super committee on foreign relations? Maybe, you know, you being a part of it, the challenges that we face, this country faces around the world, especially in the Middle East and in South Asia?
I think it's very important that the American people focus on what's happening around the world, because what's happening around the world has an impact on us here in the United States, more and more so as we become more interconnected, more of a global community. And I did have the opportunity growing up not just to live in Pakistan, but also to live in India, and Turkey, and Sri Lanka, and to travel in many parts of the world. And I do think that experience provides people an opportunity to see how others around the world perceive the United States in terms of our leadership, but it also allows us to see why what the United States does and says is important in other parts of the world, and how it's very important that we conduct our foreign policy in a way that meets our national interests and is sensitive to how other people will interpret our actions.
Foreign relations are so important, as you just rightly said. Some members seem to lack the background and the information on those important regions that we face challenges in. Do you think, you know, a little bit more kind of, you know, some, I wouldn't say education, but some kind of a mechanism or system for these members to acquaint themselves more on those issues before they go out and pass resolutions? And there have been resolutions in the past, you know, which have been making rounds around the world. Do you share some of these
Well,
views?
I think it's important that every member of Congress do his or her homework on these issues. Many members come to Congress without having any background in foreign policy or national security issues, and so they do have a responsibility to learn the issues and get up to speed. And I think a lot of them work in good faith to try and do that. I mean, they really try to better understand these issues, but there's a lot to learn, especially if you're somebody who's had no connection at all before to foreign policy issues. And so I think that especially for members who go to the Foreign Affairs Committee, the committees that have responsibility and jurisdiction over congressional legislation that affects our international relations, it's especially important that they really do their homework and get up to speed.
Moving on, I have met your families. I have the honor of meeting your family, beautiful 3 children.
That's right. I think you were covering the 2004 Democratic Convention.
Absolutely,
That's right.
absolutely, and we were staying at the same hotel.
That's right.
So, how do you balance your family life? Your family seems to be very happy with you, I guess. You know,
well, sometimes they're not always, but look, I have a...
But I'm sure you have lots of pressures with this, these leadership roles in the house and then your family life. How do you balance?
Well, balancing work life and family life is a challenge, I think, for all members of Congress. it's not that different than what other American families work with throughout this country in terms of balancing work and family. But I'm fortunate. My wife Catherine has been a wonderful partner, and our children have been great. And I am especially lucky in one regard with respect to Congress, which is that I represent a congressional district that is very close by to the nation's capital. So I'm one of the very few members of Congress that can actually go home and see my family every evening. If you represent California, Washington State, or one of the places that is more than 2,000 miles away, you are, for the most part, in Washington for your week, while your family is thousands of miles away. And so the good news for me is that I actually represent a district where I can go home to my family every evening. Yes.
Very good. Do your children see you as a role model in politics? Any chance that you would lead them into these roles?
Well, I don't know about that. In fact, we've been very careful not to try and pressure our children to move in any one direction or another. I want them to
a Van Hollen dynasty in Maryland?
And I want them to sort of beat their own path in whatever direction they want to take. Maybe one of them will become interested in politics at some time. I don't know. I think it's important for parents to try and encourage their children to, pursue their own talents and their own potential, and we'll see where that takes them.
You seem very well-rounded on foreign affairs. You have a very strong background. Now you're getting a lot of experience on budgetary issues, balancing the budget and everything, which is also a very important part of being a very effective leader in this country. And 2016, any presidential hopes, ambitions, programs?
Let me just say, for now, I'm just very focused on trying to, number one,
because you have
work with the president.
Taken care of your foreign affairs part very well.
Well,
nobody can question your credentials on that part.
Well, I've had the opportunity to work on a lot of foreign policy issues and national security issues, including something we still want to see passed that we haven't, which is the passage of this legislation on ROZs, Reconstruction Opportunity Zones. I'm very disappointed that we've not been able to get that through the Congress. We got it through the House several years ago, a bill that I introduced. We got it through, but we never saw it through the House. But so yes, on foreign policy, that's an area that I've had a long-term interest in. And as you say, now I'm sort of in the middle of these fights on domestic policy. But my focus right now is trying to successfully tackle those issues, and who knows what the future holds.
You're going to cross the bridge when
who knows what the future holds. Yeah.
Great. Thank you very much, Congressman. Thank you very much for having this coffee with us.
Not at all. Thank you. Now we have to drink it.
Absolutely. Please.
All right. All right. Cheers.
That was my interview with Congressman Chris Van Hollen. Next week, I'm going to bring you another one-on-one with Congressman Dan Burt. I look forward to your feedback and comments at Café DC at voanews.com. This is Faiz Rehman. Thank you for watching.
Stories that were told to me and photographs that I've seen. Now, my father and mother moved to Murray at the time that the new capital was being built in Islamabad, because the capital, of course, had been in Karachi.
Right.
And so we were up very high in Murray, and I've seen photographs of myself on this swing set where the snow came up to the top of the swing set. So I have it's in the people of Pakistan. And of course, the Pakistani American community here has been a great contributor to American entrepreneurialism, American culture, as well as many other areas in politics.
Any fond memories of Pakistan? I know you were you were there for a very short period of time. But anything that you would like to share with us?
Well, I was very young at the time, so I actually remember it more through to be with you again.
Thank you, sir. Can we technically call you a Pakistani American congressman since you were born in Pakistan?
Well, I'm certainly an honorary member of the Pakistani American caucus, and pleased to be part of that. But you're right, I was born in Karachi, and I visited Pakistan on several occasions as a member of Congress, and I'm very committed to trying to make sure we have strong ties between the people of the United States.
Conversations. We begin this series with my interview of Congressman Chris Van Hollen. Congressman Van Hollen is currently serving as the most senior Democratic member on the Budget Committee in the U.S. Congress. Above all, and most important to me, he was born in Karachi, Pakistan. Congressman, thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
Well, Faiz, it's great.
In this show, you will get to hear firsthand the comments, the issues that affect Pakistanis, Americans, and the global community. With insights from politicians, Washington's most valuable and powerful players, in one-on-one, candid